The Honorable Oakland County Commission, Oakland residents, and the state of Michigan. I'll keep my comments short.
Will you state your name quick just for the
Yep.
record?
My name is Dan Johnson. I am 19 years old, Michigan born, and a sophomore at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. I traveled up here for Jim Runstead's resolution. In late January, I founded People Against NDAA, which is today now in almost 40 states with 90 chapters nationwide. Huge audiences on radio and internet articles. You may ask, why would a 19-year-old, still in college, get involved in politics at such a young age? The NDAA woke me from my apathy. The most dangerous part of the NDAA is those final 7 words. Pending disposition under the law of war. There are 2 categories of people protected by the Geneva Convention and the international laws of war. Civilians and enemy combatants. In order to institute its torture program, without violating Geneva Convention, the United States created a new class of person, the unlawful enemy combatant. This class of person has none of the rights afforded to the others. But last year, the U.S. government executed Anwar al-Awlaki and his son, Abraham al-Awlaki, 16 years old, with a drone strike. Since al-Awlaki and his son had never taken up arms against the United States, the government had to change their class from unlawful enemy combatant to unprivileged enemy belligerent. That is the same term used in the NDAA. On New Year's Eve, the United States government placed every American citizen in a category it created to execute and torture. Whatever the reason that Commissioner Runstead chose to introduce this resolution, he has chosen to honor his oath. He is only doing his duty. You all as commissioners have an oath to support, protect, and uphold the U.S. and Michigan constitutions. And as citizens, you have a duty to defend liberty, your family, and the Constitution of the United States. Thomas Jefferson, in the Kentucky Resolutions, said where powers are assumed which have not been delegated, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. I now pose this question to the Oakland County Commissioners and to all the citizens of Oakland County. Do you support Commissioner Runstead's bill to nullify the NDAA, or do you support the torture and execution of the citizens of Oakland County? Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Dennis Marburger. I live in Bloomfield Township here in Oakland County, and I support the commentary by the previous gentleman. I believe it is a situation of the utmost urgency, and it's a very positive thing that Commissioner Runstead has introduced his resolution, and that you folks are considering it. I strongly urge you to support it and to get this passed. As you may know, there was the injunction issued by Judge Forrest against the indefinite detention provisions in the 2012 NDAA. She had both a temporary and permanent injunction issued. The administration very quickly appealed it. There has been a stay of that injunction. And the president said he did not want those powers, and he acted very quickly for somebody who didn't want to have this power. And it is our belief that no one should have this power to violate the rights and liberties of the American people. The purpose of government is, as Thomas Jefferson wrote, to protect those liberties. And so it's heartening to see that even in this dark hour, at this dangerous time, there is a bipartisan, even a transpartisan or nonpartisan coalition of people coming together. The day after we were last here at the state capitol, Justin Amash and Shelley Weisberg both spoke very passionately and eloquently about this. The Freedom 7 journalists who filed that lawsuit are considered to be left-of-center journalists in their views. We have people, again, from the right, from the left, from both parties, and independents who are fighting against this. The genius of the founders in framing and ratifying our Constitution and setting up our system of American federalism is that the people are deemed to be sovereign. And they said that people can then delegate some of their sovereignty to local organizations such as the county, and then delegate some of that sovereignty up to the state level. And then the states formed the Constitutional Union. The states were the agents of the people. The Constitutional Union, which the states formed, is the agent of the states. And when they get outside the bounds of their limitations, it is the right and the duty, as the founders wrote and emphasized many times, of these local and state organizations to enforce that Constitution. The parchment will not enforce itself. And as Judge Abel P. Upshur wrote in his response to Justice Story's commentaries on the Constitution, it is the nature of governments to when they are operating properly as the agents of the people, to jealously guard their prerogatives and the rights of the people. It is for the people's sovereignty and rights that these governments exist. I want to thank you all for considering this. This is very important, and urge you to pass Commissioner Runstead's Liberty Preservation Resolution. Thank you very much.
Next.
Hello, I'm Shane Trejo, a resident from Waterford and coordinator for the 10th Amendment Center in Michigan. I urge you all to support the Liberty Preservation Resolution to nullify the indefinite detention provision of the National Defense Authorization Act. I want to alert all the commissioners about some other recent events, provide some context as to why it's so important to pass this resolution. The Department of Homeland Security funded a study released a couple months back by the National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terrorism, aka START, at the University of Maryland, which listed people who were reverent of individual liberty and suspicious of centralized federal authority as, quote, extreme right-wing terrorists. The Federal Bureau of Investigation held a press conference in February this year, publicly announcing that people who oppose new federal taxes and federal regulations were potentially violent threats to law enforcement. The FBI has also released a series of flyers this year to the public as part of their Communities Against Terrorism initiative, which urge American citizens to spy on one another and constantly look over their shoulders to report any type of supposedly suspicious behavior to the feds. Such suspicious behavior described in these reports include persons who use cash instead of credit cards during financial transactions, avoid eye contact in social situations, take pictures in public, or own private facilities unavailable to the greater public. The military ran training drills in June in St. Louis, Missouri, with dozens of Army trucks, Humvees, and tanks driving through residential neighborhoods. Around that same time, low-flying Black Hawk helicopters were spotted in Chicago as part of another training exercise. The Pentagon engaged in a wargaming series called Unified Quest 2011 last year to prepare for a large-scale economic breakdown which would force the Army to be deployed domestically to keep order amid civil unrest. There are now 64 drone bases in the United States, with 12 of them housing Predator drones, the ones used in warfare overseas. They are allowed to spy on anyone as long as it's claimed to be an accident. The footage can then be held for up to 3 months. A Federal Aviation Administration estimate says that there should be around 30,000 drones in the skies by 2025. The federal government is now buying ammunition by the hundreds of millions. In March, they purchased 450 million hollow point bullets for the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The occurrences I just described seem like things that would happen in a repressive police state, not in the land of the free. We cannot afford to make the same mistakes that other countries have made, ignoring the warning signs and choosing to do nothing when there is still time to act. We must refuse to let some of the most tragic events in history repeat themselves in our own backyard. Please vote yes on the Liberty Preservation Resolution so we can take precautions at the county level to prevent the further escalation of the police state and preserve our constitutional rights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any public comments? Okay, seeing none, will.
Next, we have Dan Johnson.
Honorable Oakland County Commission, Oakland residents, and the state of Michigan. I'll keep my comments short. My name is Dan Johnson. I am 19 years old, Michigan born, and a sophomore at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. In late January, I founded People Against the NDAA, which is now in almost 40 states with 90 chapters nationwide, and huge audiences in radio and internet articles. I would like to bring before you today the opinion of our troops on this matter. If we are to support them, we must start listening to them. Our military men are the people we would be asking to implement the NDAA, to detain citizens of Oakland County, and possibly even execute American citizens, as happened to Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son, Abraham al-Awlaki, in Pakistan last year. Retired four-star Marine generals James P. Krulak and Joseph C. Hoare, in a New York Times op-ed titled Guantanamo Forever, stated their opposition to the NDAA and remarked, in his inaugural address, President Obama called on us to reject the false choice between our safety and our ideals. We agree. Now, to protect both, he must veto the National Defense Authorization Act that Congress is expected to pass this week. This budget bill, which can be vetoed without cutting financing for our troops, is both misguided and unnecessary. The President already has the power and flexibility to effectively fight terrorism. One provision would authorize the military to indefinitely detain, without charge, people suspected of involvement with terrorism, including United States citizens apprehended on American soil. Due process would be a thing of the past. Some claim this provision would merely codify existing law. However, current law empowers the military to detain people caught on the battlefield. But this provision would expand the battlefield to the United States and hand Osama bin Laden his unearned victory long after his well-earned demise. Mandatory military custody would reduce, if not eliminate, the role of federal courts in terrorism cases. Since 9/11, the shaky, untested military commissions had convicted over only 6 people of terror-related charges, compared to more than 400 in civilian courts. Having served various administrations, they say, we know that politicians of both parties love this country and wants to keep it safe, like commissioners of Oakland County. But right now in Congress, or back then in Congress, they're all too willing to undermine our ideals in the name of fighting terrorism. And they should remember that the American people are assets, and their rights are assets, not liabilities. Commissioners, I personally want to have a family someday. I want to have a future in this country for my children. And I don't see much of a future for them. In a future where your children, my children, and our families can be indefinitely detained and executed, it's not a future I would look forward to. Our combat men and women, and this one teenager who wants to have a future in this country, urge you to support Commissioner Runsted's resolution. You are choosing between 1776 America and 1934 Germany. I understand this will pass, and I want to thank you for choosing wisely.
And the last speaker I have on the list is Shane Trejo.
Hello, I'm Shane Trejo from Waterford, Michigan, representing the Michigan 10th Amendment Center. I am gravely concerned about the effect that the National Defense Authorization Act will have on the access of quality information available to the public. My concerns are shared not just by many of the speakers here this morning, but by Daniel Ellsberg and Chris Hedges as well. These men are 2 of the plaintiffs who are suing President Obama over the effects that the NDAA will have on their ability to report credible information to the public as whistleblowers and journalists, respectively. Daniel Ellsberg, the famous whistleblower who released the Pentagon Papers to the press in 1971, stated that the NDAA has a chilling effect on his free speech, since he is frequently in contact with people who the government considers to be substantially supporting terrorism because they provide information to the public that does not paint the United States government in a favorable light, namely Julian Assange and those affiliated with his group WikiLeaks. Ellsberg's association with these people would qualify him to be indefinitely detained under the NDAA, since the law was written with such vague terminology. Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author, said that the NDAA is a huge and egregious assault against our democracy that overturns 200 years of established law that has kept the military out of domestic policing. Hedges continued on to say that the national security establishment came out against the act. The CIA, FBI, Attorney General, the Director of National Intelligence, none of them wanted it. The act is such an abomination that even the intelligence agencies most responsible for combating terrorism felt that this frightening overreach of power was not necessary to keep Americans safe. The Constitution was written to preserve freedom of the press because the Founding Fathers realized that the will of the public could not be subverted if that public was well informed. Thomas Jefferson once said, "The only security of all is in a free press. The force of public opinion cannot be resisted when permitted freely to be expressed. The agitation it produces must be submitted to. It is necessary to keep the waters pure." Access to quality information is crucial in keeping our society functioning fairly and democratically. I implore you all to vote yes on the Liberty Preservation Resolution to ensure that journalists and whistleblowers aren't bullied into silence to the detriment of the public at large. Thank you.
That concludes all the individuals that have signed up for public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to speak that hadn't had a chance to sign up, I'll give you an opportunity now. I see Commissioner Runstead. Would you like to speak under public comment?